7 candles, 1 little boy, 3 people in a room that was supposed to hold 30. I still remember the exact moment I knew they weren't coming. Not because my phone stayed silent, not because the driveway stayed empty, but because my son, my 7-year-old, stopped running to the window. He just sat down, put his party hat on, and smiled anyway. That smile broke me in ways I still don't have words for. My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you isn't a story about family drama or petty arguments. It's about the moment I realized that the people who were supposed to love us unconditionally had made a choice, and that choice had a 7-year-old's face. It started, like most quiet destructions do, years before that birthday. The day I married my husband, I didn't just gain a partner, I lost a family. Not all at once. That would have been cleaner, easier to process. No, they disappeared gradually. A missed holiday here, an unanswered call there, invitations that got lost, until eventually the silence became the message. I had married outside of what they approved, outside of their expectations, their traditions, their control. And for that, I became a ghost to them, invisible, disowned, labeled difficult, ungrateful, poisonous. Words they used casually, like they hadn't once held me as a child. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. I had built something real, a home full of warmth, laughter, and a little boy who thought dragons were the greatest creatures ever invented. But children have a way of making you face the things you've buried. When Ethan turned 7, I made the mistake of hoping. I sent invitations. I made calls. I ordered the cake he wanted, chocolate with blue frosting and a dragon on top. I blew up balloons in colors he picked himself. I set out enough chairs for everyone. Every single one of them said they'd come. I woke up the next morning different. Not dramatic different, not screaming into pillows different. Something quieter and more dangerous than that. Cold, clear, decided. I opened the family group chat. 30 people who claimed to love us, who posted Bible verses and family photos and talked endlessly about togetherness, but who couldn't find 2 hours on a Saturday for a 7-year-old's birthday. I typed, "Thanks for skipping Ethan's birthday." Then I waited. 5 minutes, 10, an hour, nothing. And then, because something in me needed to make the absurdity visible, I opened my banking app. I sent my mother $1, one single dollar. In the memo line I wrote, "For Ethan's birthday, since you forgot." I pressed send. Within minutes, the chat exploded. "What is this? Are you mocking us? How dare you?" My aunt called it disrespectful. My brother accused me of poisoning my child against the family. 30 people who had nothing to say about an empty birthday party suddenly had a great deal to say about $1. I read every message. Then I muted the chat and went to fold laundry. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. Not a soft knock, an urgent one, the kind that tightens your chest before you even reach the handle. I opened it to find 2 police officers on my porch. The world tilted. "Are you Sarah Collins?" the woman asked. "Yes, we need to speak with you. There's been a financial complaint filed and an allegation of child endangerment." The words didn't fully land at first. They felt like they belonged to someone else's story. I stepped outside and pulled the door behind me, very aware that Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring. My mother had called the police. She hadn't called to apologize for the birthday. She hadn't called to explain herself or check on her grandson. She had called law enforcement and told them I was mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and that my child was in danger, all because I sent her $1 and said something true. I felt sick, but I let them in because I had nothing to hide. They walked through my home slowly, the way investigators do. not accusatory, just watching. They saw a clean house, food in the refrigerator, homework on the counter, drawings taped to the fridge, a night light in Ethan's room, books stacked beside his bed. A little boy who looked up at a female officer and said proudly, "I'm drawing a dragon. It protects my mom." The male officer asked me about employment. I showed him my laptop, my invoices, my contracts, my payment history. He asked about food. I opened the fridge. He asked whether I yelled at my son. Ethan answered that one himself. "My mom sings when she's mad," he said. "It's kind of funny." The officer laughed, a real laugh, and something shifted in the room. But then came the question that stopped my heart entirely. The woman officer crouched down beside Ethan and asked, gently, whether anyone had ever said anything that scared him about his mom. He thought about it carefully, the way kids do when they're trying to be honest. "Grandma said I should come live with her," he said, "because Mummy is poor." "When did she say that?" "On the phone, after my birthday." The officers exchanged a look I'll never forget. I handed over my phone, the entire group chat, every message, every insult, every threat, every timestamp, all of it, unedited and undeniable. The woman read through it for a long time. "She's using the system to punish you," she said quietly. "I just wanted them to care," I whispered. "I never wanted any of this. You didn't cause this." Before they left, they told me the report would be filed as unfounded, no evidence of neglect, no grounds for concern. But they were also opening a case against my mother for false reporting and harassment. That evening, my phone showed a voicemail from her. I almost didn't listen to it, but I did. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It wasn't soft or confused or even sad. It was cold and deliberate, the voice of someone who had expected to win. "You embarrassed me. The police laughed at me. This isn't finished." She wasn't sorry she tried to take my son. She was angry it hadn't worked. 2 weeks later, she sat across from me in a courtroom. No audience, no family rallying around her, no carefully crafted story to tell. Just a judge, a stack of evidence, and the truth she'd spent years trying to bury. He reviewed everything methodically, the messages, the police reports, Ethan's statement, my employment records, the timeline of events. Then he looked at her over his glasses and said something I've replayed many times since. "You used emergency services to settle a personal grudge. That is abuse." Her lawyer called it concern. The judge called it what it was. She was fined, ordered into counseling, and warned clearly, one more false report and she would lose all visitation rights permanently. She never called again, not once. And I want to be honest with you. I waited for the grief of that. I waited to feel the loss of my mother the way I'd always feared I would. But what I felt instead was something I hadn't experienced in years. Quiet. Real, actual quiet. I changed my number. I removed myself from the family chat. I built a smaller, tighter circle around my home and my child. And I filled that circle only with people who had shown up, not just in words, but in presence. Ethan stopped asking why they never came. He stopped wishing for love from people who had chosen, repeatedly and deliberately, not to give it. Because here's what I've learned about children. They are remarkably adaptive. When you stop performing grief over the people who've left, they stop grieving too. They take their cues from you. And when I chose peace over bitterness, Ethan chose it with me. His 8th birthday was everything the 7th wasn't. Friends crowded the living room, neighbors brought food, classmates ran through the backyard. There was music and cake and the particular beautiful chaos that comes from a room full of people who actually wanted to be there. At the end of the night, Ethan wrapped both arms around my neck and whispered in my ear, "Mom, this is the best birthday ever." I held him for a long time because that, right there, was the whole point. That was what I'd been protecting. Not my pride, not my anger, not my need to be right. Just this. A boy who felt loved completely. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've sat on a bathroom floor crying silently so no one would hear, if you've made excuses for people who never once made them for you, if you've watched your child search a window for someone who was never going to appear, I want you to hear this. Protecting your child is not cruelty. It is the most loving thing you will ever do. Boundaries don't mean you've failed at family. They mean you've finally understood what family is actually supposed to feel like. And choosing peace over performance, truth over silence, your child's joy over someone else's comfort, that is not weakness. That is the bravest, clearest, most human thing there is. You don't need 30 people in the room. You just need the right ones.